Hello and welcome to another episode of A Weekly Waypoint. Today we are beginning our next retrospective and it's gonna be Worms. If you've never played the Worms games and you don't know what they are, basically it's this kind of like strategy action game that doesn't really have many contemporaries. Is that the right word? That's not the right word. If you didn't grow up with Worms, then you have missed out, sadly, because this is the Worms I grew up with, and we'll get to the names in just a minute, because you may notice that this video is about two things, because I do my retrospectives as part of my Weekly Waypoint, and in the Weekly Waypoint I like to talk about the games I've played this week. So just to get it out of the way, if there's any concern, I am going to give my first impressions on the World of Warcraft expansion, The War Within, but given that it's still in early access, I will make this the final topic of the video if you want to dip out, and also I will be avoiding spoilers too. But yeah, I decided to name the Worms after mostly characters in WoW, but also some of the devs, because why not? I ran out of ideas. The first two teams contain some of the key characters which exist within the War Within expansion. The third team is the villains of each expansion. We don't know if Xal'atath is going to be the final villain of the War Within, but that's certainly how she's being set up as. I don't think she actually will be, but that's why we've got a team with Xal'atath, Firak, Zoval, and oh my god, N'Zoth on it. And then finally we have a team with some of the devs on it, or at least their last names. So we'll see how they fare against some of their creations. It's a little upsetting watching friends in Anduin and Magni, etc. battle it out, but you know, that's just how it's gotta be today. So yeah, Worms. This is Worms for the PlayStation 1. And yeah, there is an MS-DOS version of it that I do own on Steam, but I thought it would be easier to play the PlayStation 1 version, to be honest. Plus, the PlayStation 1 version is the one I grew up with, and while I don't know if there's really any differences between the two, you know, I play the one I know. Now, this is gonna be like a nostalgia thing, right? This has gotta be rose-tinted glasses. If you have never seen or played Worms, you must be looking at this game going, damn, he ugly, you know? You must be looking at this game going, that looks really crusty, but honestly, going back and playing this round, I had a blast. It came up for round 2 at the end, and I almost pressed yes, but I was like, nah, I gotta get to recording the commentary for this video. But the original Worms, obviously not the best version of Worms out there. Later versions iterated on it successfully with nicer graphics, a nicer aesthetic, better weapons, better handling, all that stuff. But I will always have a soft spot in my heart for the original Worms. I have so many memories associated with this game. Me and my dad used to play this game together all the time, and then when he was busy, I would just play against myself like I'm doing now. You know how some people play against themselves in chess? It's a little bit like that. Worms is basically chess. It's got the same number of letters in its name and everything. In fact, there's a reason I rarely play against the CPU, and it's because back in Worms 1, it would take an absolute age to think and process what it was going to do. In fact, now that I think about it, it was kind of wild that we had that level of AI back then at all. But what's funny is in the modern Worms games, I doubt they take much time to calculate what they need to do. It's probably a matter of a second or two, if less. And that's not how you say that phrase, if that. But even then, I just feel like I don't want to play against computers, I want to play against myself. And you might be like, well, you know, how are you supposed to be invested in the strategy of your team if you're then just gonna go and play the team that you're facing off against? And how do you stop yourself from, you know, favouring a team and plotting against yourself essentially and choosing a favourite? And my response to that would just be, don't really think about it, try and live in the move, try and treat every worm individually, apart from obviously like not blowing up your team, which is easier said than done in this series. And you kind of have to stretch that a bit thin when it gets to the last few turns and there's only a few worms left, and you know, positioning and movement is really important, but you can still kind of get yourself in the brain space of like, I'm going to do my best to get this worm to win. Damn, I missed. Okay, now what would this worm do? I'm going to do my best to get this worm to win. It's how I've always played it. Actually, no, it's not how I've always played it. When I was a kid, I used to set up matches where I would spend the entire time sending every worm to their kamikaze doom. I would literally set up a match of 16 worms, and they would all just kamikaze into each other, and the last one standing would win, which would usually be the last worm to take its turn if it hadn't already been yeeted into the sky or the ocean. I was in single digits. I found this extremely funny. I haven't tried it since I've become an adult. Maybe I should. Maybe it's still a great time. I would also have games where I would just drill down into the underground or tunnel with the blowtorch into the earth and just make these little underground bases and not have any of the worms fight each other. At least not for a while, until, you know, suddenly Worm 1 would turn on Worm 2 with a shotgun and hell would break loose. Remember having an imagination as a kid? That shit was so fun. I used to love worms so much that when I would eat my toast in the morning before school and take bites out of my toast, I would imagine it being like the worm battlefield, where, you know, artillery leaves giant chunks in the land, and I would imagine worms fighting across my piece of toast. Ah, the good old days. I really do love worms, and I'm so excited to do this retrospective and play through Armageddon. And, you know, I'm going to have to look on the wiki and see. I think there's a few games which are like really similar versions to each other, so I don't know if we're going to touch on every single game. For instance, I did play the hell out of Worms Open Warfare on the PSP, but Worms Reloaded is basically a PC port of that game and its sequel, so we probably shouldn't bother with the PSP version. So yeah, I'm looking now. For instance, there's Worms the Director's Cut, which is the next game in the series after this one. It's basically just on a different platform with some bonuses. It's basically just this game. The one after that, Worms 2, is basically pointless because it's then succeeded by Worms Armageddon, which is basically Worms 2 but also with a single player campaign mode. That's something worth mentioning. I've never really bothered with the campaign modes all that much, except for some rare Steam achievements in my favourite entry in the series, which we will get to later, but I've always enjoyed Worms more as like a multiplayer battle experience, even if it's just against myself. So yeah, I think that's all the worm talk I've got in me for now. Obviously the gameplay will continue in the background. If you want to just tune me out, if you're curious about how this match ends and you don't care about World of Warcraft, you can go ahead and do that. But otherwise, I'm going to start talking WoW. So as mentioned, I'm not going to specifically talk about spoilers, but what I say will inevitably colour your expectations. So if you want to go in as blind as possible, I will bid you adieu here. But World of Warcraft, The War Within, the 10th expansion for World of Warcraft, came out in early access the other day, and the whole early access thing is stupid and I hate it and I bought into it and I'm part of a problem, I know. But it's been really lame because I like experiencing this alongside friends, and you know, the split in people who did and did not buy the early access edition is Blizzard's fault. I tend to just upgrade my way up the editions as the months go by and the paydays come in, so I kind of just did that this time round as well. But yeah, I mean, it worked out in my favour because I wasn't able to get the week off and it would have come out at the start of my work week and it would have sucked. But also, at the same time, just let everyone play on the same day. Hey, I know that ain't capitalism, but it is basic human decency. Anyway, so if you are more interested in my opinions in all of the previous expansions in World of Warcraft, because if I go through them now, we will be here forever. I did actually recently make a video on that very topic, and it got hardly any views because the weekly waypoint from a couple of weeks ago when we talked about Wipeout HD is still stealing all of the views which might otherwise come my way in my other videos. I love the way the YouTube algorithm works, don't you? Literally, you can go to my channel and see that episode of a weekly waypoint has 2.1 thousand views. This is followed up by 21 views, 9 views, 3 views, 26 views, 4 views, 3 views, 3 views, and 2 views. YouTube, please, that video has enough views, just send them my way for the new stuff. Anyway, I'll link the video down below. But to give an extremely brief summary, Dragonflight didn't really land for me until they started doing all of the crazy end of expansion stuff. I had almost like a gamer identity crisis, for want of a less lame term, when I was leveling through Dragonflight, because it just felt like a slog, and the second I hit endgame, I just wanted to uninstall the game and unsubscribe, which isn't really a thing I've ever had happen with me with WoW, and I've been playing since Mists of Pandaria on and off, but fairly frequently. And The War Within, after its leveling experience, I want to say I'm about as invested in the game as I have been since maybe Legion, definitely since Battle for Azeroth. The leveling experience is usually pretty good, to be fair, but this one is really bloody good. My main takeaway from this expansion leveling experience has been that I did not expect to like the Irvin this much. I absolutely love our rocky fellas. I absolutely adore our stony blokes, our gravelly fellas, our igneous geodudes. Okay, this is getting ridiculous. I really love the lore behind them and their culture and the way they talk and sound and the way they look and the quests surrounding a lot of them. I'm probably overhyping this because I don't think as many people responded to the Irvin as positively as I did. I don't think it's been negative at all. I just think I have an outlier of an extremely positive reaction to the Irvin, but I really, really love them. There is, of course, Hallowfall, if you've been paying attention to beta talk. Again, I won't spoil anything, but people are in love with Hallowfall, and rightfully so. It's a fantastic zone. I kind of wish I hadn't heard anything about it going in, because I think a lot of the majesty of that zone is in the surprise of what it is, and we don't learn much more about it, really, other than, like, what we already know from just face value stuff. That is something I've got to say. The War Within does not reinvent the wheel, and just like most modern leveling experiences, the War Within's leveling experience is basically a quick tour of all of the zones and some zone stories around, like, here's what this place is, here's what the people who live here go through, on to the next zone. And I felt this most keenly in Azkahet. It felt like I'd barely stepped foot in there before I was being whisked away again. That being said, Blizzard have been making a great big fuss about their renewed approach to storytelling, and it's not for nothing. This leveling experience has been chock full of amazing cutscenes, some really deep and realistic, I want to say, character writing based on, like, the world they live in and the things they've been through. There are more stay a while and listen moments than there have ever been before. A lot of them aren't even signposted to you. You kind of have to click around and check in with people, and you'll see some stuff there. There was a conversation in a Discord where I was talking to people, and they were like, oh, I haven't seen that many of them. And I've been like, no, you literally have to look for them, because they're great when you find them. I do kind of wish they signposted them better, because sometimes they put the little speech bubble up against a character's head to be like, hey, this character has optional extra dialogue where they're gonna do some lore talk and stuff. But a lot of the time that speech bubble just wasn't there, and it was just like, oh, if you happen to talk to these people, they have more to say with the voice acting and stuff. And the other thing I want to say is that the side quests, and I feel like this was probably a thing in Dragonflight, but because I wasn't really vibing with that expansion, I didn't really notice it, but the side quests are so good now. Because the way WoW used to work is all quests were the same kind of exclamation mark, and you just picked them all up, bam, 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 bam. You didn't really read most of them, you went around a zone, you killed all the things, you picked up all the boar asses, and you brought them back, and handed them in, went to the next hub, and then bam, 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 rinse and repeat. Over the years, that steadily evolved into, like, oh, okay, there are some quests that kind of grab your attention and are worth reading and paying attention to. I would say this would be kind of like the Legion era of questing, but it would still feel like, actually I remember this most egregiously with BFA, it would still feel like there was the quests which were really interesting, and then there were the quests to fill the XP and stuff. And then it evolved some more, and they started putting those more story-centric, important quests with a new icon, with the shield icon, but now I feel like it's evolved again, and they really are treating it differently. I think one of the reasons I feel like I got whisked through Azkahet, sorry, I don't know if I said it wrong earlier. One of the reasons it felt like I got whisked through there is because I was keeping up with my level, to make sure that I was the right level to start each zone that it recommended the level to be at. That was the best sentence I've ever constructed in my life. And so by the time I finished Azkahet, I was pretty much max level, so I haven't really done any side quests in Azkahet, so that's probably why I feel like I've barely stepped foot in there. Because these side quests feel like the kind of quests which would have been in the main storyline, quote-unquote, beforehand. Like, I can't talk specifics, can I? Let's just say I've done some stuff that I'm surprised wasn't in the main storyline, and it doesn't feel like unimportant things. There's been the odd side quest here and there where I'm like, okay, you want me to go find this town full of people who are stranded, and there's a bunch of monsters attacking them, and we need to make sure they're all okay. But even that is kind of grounded in, like, interesting characterization and some dialogue where they get into some stuff, it just didn't necessarily hit with me. So I actually planned to do all the side quests across my various alts for War Within, which is something I absolutely did not do in Dragonflight, because despite kind of being like, oh yeah, I'm down for a dragon adventure at the start of it, it ended up kind of boring me to tears. Dragonflight wasn't bad, but something about the questing just felt like such a slog to me. It was such a shame. I actually think some of the problem was the level scaling with like the damage you do and the HP that mobs had was really wacky in Dragonflight. I remember I went into it melting everything around me, and by the time I was like level 66, 67, it was taking me ages to kill a single mob, and I was almost dying doing so. That problem did not happen in the War Within. I did get a little bit weaker leveling up, but not drastically so, not enough to affect my enjoyment. I also want to mention delves. I have done some delves. I haven't done all of them. I haven't done too many of them, but I am basically the target audience for delves. I think Holly Longdale mentioned that she had this idea of like mid-core players between casual and hardcore, people who played a lot of World of Warcraft but weren't really into, you know, mythic dungeons or raiding. And I was like, yeah, Holly, hi, hand up, that's me. And she was like, that's who we're making delves for. So what do I think about them? I really like delves. I don't know if I'm going to get sick of them. It does still rely on like affix-based gameplay, which I'm not a huge fan of, where they're like, oh, there's this explosive spore that if you damage it or if you happen to step in its path, it's going to follow you around and explode on you. And I've always found that kind of thing to be more of a nuisance than something that's enjoyable. But so far it reminds me of, and remember, nuance is a thing, as I say that, the positive parts of Torghast. Like, when people were playing Torghast on the beta and they're like, oh, this is really good, remember that? This is kind of how that feels before it got tied into, like, having to grind shit in it. So that's cool. I think delves are a win so far. And yeah, all in all, bloody loving World of Warcraft. I've had an absolutely wonderful time with it, and if you have yet to play it, I hope you have as good a time as I. We've got just enough time to sneak in one last topic. I said we wouldn't, but we will. And that's this. Remember the problems, the myriad of problems I was having with Guild Wars 2? Well, I think I've fixed them. For real this time. I've been playing for about a week, and I haven't had a problem. So, there's going to be a gap of some footage, but expect Adventures Interior at some point in the future to make a return if all continues to go well. I'm currently playing through Living World Season 1, and it's great. So thank you for watching. I will see you next week. And yes, Holly Longdale was the worm of the match. Oh, you're still here? Hey, do you want to see how long it took me to enter these names? I sped up the footage as much as Vegas Pro 14 will allow me to.